Hey, my name is Pastor Rebel Hurd, and yes, we will record this. Okay, let me start that over. My name is Pastor Rebel Hurd, and I serve as your director for Evangelical Mission. And I hope I know all of you. And if I don't, well, make sure that I do. I am going to pass it right along to Pastor Janelle.
Hi, friends. I'm in my home office from Bemidji today, and I'm associate to the bishop and have been served almost for 2 years now. And I'll have a little bit of the program later when we talk about ministries. And I'll pass the baton to Kathy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yep, Kathy Levenhagen, also currently right at the moment at home and work with SAMS and conferences 1 and 2. And so lots of familiar faces. Glad to see some SAMS on board today. And I don't know who else is here today.
Dennis is here.
Dennis, you're up.
Okay. Dennis Preston, glad to be with you today. I'm the engagement minister for conferences 7 and 8. Just seek to be of service however I can be. Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Dernier, and I get to be the Director of Communications, Events, and Youth Ministry for our students.
Is that everybody? All right. Good. There's a lot of us on this call, so I'm not necessarily tracking all of us that are here, but thanks everyone. I'm going to start with just a very familiar psalm. This is the psalm from today's lectionary reading, which sometimes I alternate between using our daily texts and the daily lectionary reading. And today is from the daily lectionary, from Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. The Lord will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. The one who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. The Lord will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. So in small groups for about 4 or 5 minutes, in groups of about 4 people each, I just invite you to share how you are experiencing now or have recently experienced help from the Lord, the ways in which the Lord is bringing you help and protection and sustenance and whatever it is that you need in these days. And I will share a very simple example from my own life. I have been getting 8 hours of sleep every single night, and that has way more to do with the Lord's graciousness and taking burdens and anxieties off my heart than it does with how well I eat or what time I go to bed at night. So I'm grateful for the Lord's provisioning in that way. So let's go ahead and share with each other now. If you want to put us into rooms, Chris. All right. Okay, everyone. Grateful that we have a special guest with us today, whose work I've come to know well and appreciate, but I'm going to let Pastor Rebel introduce our guests. So you go ahead, Rebel.
Thanks so much, Bishop. So we are blessed the second year in a row around the same very time to have my good friend. See, it went from being friend last night to today, good friend, Tim Brown, Pastor Tim, who is the Director of Congregational Stewardship of the ELCA, and really just a gift, a true gift of talent and ability to share in a way that is just really clear and understandable, and one that we can relay to our congregations and our people. And so I welcome you, and I thank you, and I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Pastor Rebel, and I'm grateful to be upgraded to great friend. I think that's a wonderful status update for today. I'll post it on social media. My name is Pastor Tim Brown. I am a pastor in the ELCA. I've served parishes in inner city Chicago and then Raleigh, North Carolina, where I currently live, with my son Finley, who has his first baseball game tonight. And so I know God shows no partiality, but should God show partiality, the Marlins would love to start their season with a big W. And then my younger son, Alistair, is 8 years old and desires to be a soccer star in the footsteps of Messi. And should that not work out, he's decided he'll go to medical school. So I think either of those options are going to be pretty good for me in my old age. I'm really, really grateful to be with you today. And I was asked to do just a very short, brief presentation on narrative budgets, the kind of the top 10 list of things I think you should do when creating a narrative budget. But I also realized that not all of us may be familiar with narrative budgets. In serving both of my parishes and now being with the churchwide office for 2 years, I've come to teach a lot of congregations how to do narrative budgets and the differences between a narrative budget and a line item budget. But I know it's not the common practice throughout all the ELCA. So I'm just curious, how many of you, and you can do this by raising hands or do the little wave hand thing in the corner, how many of you have done narrative budgets or currently do a narrative budget? Anybody? You can even just give me a thumbs up. Excellent. So we have about half a dozen, I think, right? So this is going to be new and interesting territory. I'm going to show you an example of the difference between a narrative budget and a line item budget. And I want to tell you right off the bat that narrative budgets do not replace line item budgets. Line item budgets are the work that you do to create a narrative budget. And we all have line item budgets. Hopefully you have one for your household. We definitely have one for churches. But the difference between a narrative budget and a line item budget is a line item budget tells a quantitative story. Quantitative stories on numbers and amounts. A narrative budget tells a qualitative story about impact and lives changed. Now, from a sociological standpoint, and I work in stewardship, so I study both numbers and sociology. From a sociological standpoint, we actually find that numbers are not super motivating. If they were super motivating, then we'd all be fit as a fiddle, right? Because we look at the scale and we see what it says. We understand that that's not it, but what is super motivating are stories of impact, stories of change, stories that we share with one another, which is why narrative budgets actually spur more generosity than line item budgets. Sometimes I think I need to create a narrative budget for me and my workout plan so that I get on the ball a little bit more. I'm going to show you an example really quickly. And so, Rebel, I'm going to take control and share my screen if that's all right. Okay. So what you're looking at here is the difference between a line item budget and a narrative budget. A line item budget, you can see here on my left side, and you all probably recognize this, right? Local charity agency, how much you give to everything income-wise, reserves you have, and then expenses, right? And in looking at this, you see we're in the black by just a little bit. But a narrative budget is this other side, where we show how the line item budget actually breaks up amongst the different things that we do in the community, the different things that we do to change lives in Christ's name. And in this line item budget, we've actually put both dollar amounts and percentage-wise, so you can see kind of how the Venn or how the pie graph breaks up. So in a narrative budget, we would say in worship ministry, we do this. Worship and music fill us with awe and connect us with God. Weekly worship and special celebrations are a major focus of staff time and volunteer, including weddings, funerals, Black History, Asian Heritage Service, and seasonal celebrations throughout the year. We spend about 33% of our budget on this, total $67,000. Now, this is a big church, right? They have a lot going on. But you see how you can easily catch a glimpse of exactly what they're doing using the narrative budget, but it tells the compelling story of how they change lives while they do it. Creating a narrative budget can be a little daunting for some folks, and I want to break it down for you to make it a little less daunting. And so I have 10 narrative budget tips with a nod to David Letterman on ways that you can create this with ease. Now, can you all see the screen? Does it show the top 10 narrative budgets? All right. Nope. See, this is what always happens. And I did a whole presentation talking about a screen that was not up there one time. And so I appreciate your honesty. All right. Now can we see it? Top 10 narrative budget themes, right? We're good?
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, here we go. Number 10. You need to be clear on why you're doing a narrative budget. Narrative budgets tell the qualitative story, not the quantitative story. They're about honest impact and cost, and narrative budgets don't hide cost, they reveal mission priorities. You're not doing a narrative budget to hide any cost from anybody. In fact, you're doing it so that they see actually the impact of every cost that you do. This is really key, especially for folks who for years have worked in industries where they show profit and loss sheets. They say, well, narrative budgets, that's kind of finagling things. And you're saying, no, we're actually telling the truth with the narrative budget. For instance, the truth isn't that you had 7 kids in Sunday school this last year. The truth is that Sally had an encounter with God in Sunday school that she could never have in any other way, which is why the Sunday school hour is really important for your ministry, and it's worth that $1,000 that you spend on it every year. Right? That's the truth. The truth is not that we had 7 kids there. The truth is that somebody had a real impactful encounter with God there, and that's why we do it. Right? So you want to be true and honest about why you're doing narrative budgets. All right? That's number 10. Number 9, use your mission statement as a guide. When you're creating your narrative budget, you have your line item budget on one side, and you're wondering, well, how are we going to break up this line item budget into areas of impact or ministry areas of impact? A lot of times you can do this using your mission statement. If your mission statement says something like, I was working with a church, it said something like, to reach out in God's love for growing faith, encouraging peace, and sponsoring hope, right? Well, for their narrative budget, they had 4 different areas where they talked about how they were worshiping God to encourage peace and sponsoring hope and in growing in faith, right? They had them there, and then they split up the things in their line item budget to fit into the narrative budget. Mission statements are not just things that you have to make people feel good. They should be something that you come back to again and again and again throughout your ministry. Your folks should be able to recite it, hopefully. And if they can't, it's probably a little too long. So you want to use your mission statement as kind of the line or the guide, the plumb line for creating your narrative budget. All right. Tip number 8. Ready? Create ministry areas and assign line items where they fit. So narrative budget's not just telling one long story. You're going to tell like 3 or 4 little stories about impact on where you go. And some line items will be cut up between a number of ministry areas, and that's okay. Like, for instance, when I was a senior pastor, I did stuff with reaching out and caring ministries. I did stuff with worship and music ministries. I did stuff with youth and faith formation ministries, right? I did it a lot of places. And so my salary and my benefits were actually split up amongst all of the places where they were, and there were round numbers, right? It wasn't all exactly where I landed every time. Round numbers, because for narrative budgets, approximate costs work just fine. The point is not to put exact numbers and decimal points where it is. The point is to tell the story, a real story about the ministry that you do, the life-changing work that you do. So don't get overly hung up on hand-wringing details. Create the 4 or 5 ministry areas, and you really don't want more than 5. And put that line item budget where it is. All right. And I'll give you just an example. I showed it before. This is one way that I did it. I used to put the line item budget and then I'd color code it into these 5 ministry areas. And these are the ministries that we wanted to highlight because they fit in with our mission statement. And so we would cut up the line item budget and we would move them into these areas. And I would just, for my own sake, color code them so I knew where everything was kind of going, right? It's not that hard to do. St. Jude by the Butterfly Preserve can do it. You can do it. All right. Tip number 7. Use your staff as a resource. No church staff member does just one job. So ask your staff to audit their time and figure out how they split up their ministry across ministry areas. And then you do the same. And it makes it easy to kind of take those salaries and those benefits and split them up across the different ministry areas. Use them as a resource. You have them there. You don't have to do this alone. Tip number 6, do the same audit on your ministry outpost. And you're like, Pastor Tim, what's a ministry outpost? We don't have one of those. You do have one of those. Your ministry outpost is your building. I'm big on telling the truth. Call a thing what it is, right? Martin Luther said something about that, I think. None of us have church buildings. Church buildings eat up so much of line item budgets. And church buildings are this amorphous thing that just sounds kind of dead and dull, right? What you have, what I had, what I have now when I attend congregations are ministry outposts. It's the place where we come to gather around Christ's word, to be fed by the sacraments, and then we go out and we spread that love and that word into our communities. Then we come back again and we go out again. It's kind of like breathing. It's kind of like a heartbeat. It's a ministry outpost where you do the work of God in your neighborhood and in your context. In fact, if I had my way, I would change every church building line item into ministry outpost line items, because that's exactly what you're doing. That tells the truth. So think honestly about your building usage. Distribute this amongst the ministry areas and consider calling your building a ministry outpost, because that's what it is. I was working with a congregation and they were looking to raise money to buy a new AC unit. And they kept saying, yeah, we need a new AC unit. We need money for the AC unit. How are we going to raise money for the AC unit? And I said, time out. Why do you need a new AC unit? And they said, well, this one's dead. It's like, I know, but why replace it? What are we doing here? And they eventually got around to, oh, they need a place where adults and children can hear stories about Jesus without being distracted by the heat. That's the truth. I'm like, well, that's how you talk about it then. We don't talk about an AC unit. I got an AC unit here at home that had to be replaced this last year. How are you going to get me to invest in a new one? Well, tell the truth about it. What's it doing? How's it changing? How's it shaping things? You know, we need a cool ministry outpost so that we can hear stories about Jesus without being distracted by the heat. That's the truth. Narrative budgets can get at that truth in a way that line item budgets just can't. Tip number 5. Take your ministry staff, volunteer and paid, and have them figure out where they spend their time and put it into percentages. So it's not just where they spend their time and allocate their salaries to those different ministry areas, but do it percentage-wise. Percentages tell the same story in a different way. As I was just showing you before, you have the bottom line, right? How much you spend in that category. And then you have the percentage of time or missional budget that you spend on that category. And you can see how amazing your impact is and how many lives are changed by doing that. And you do more than you think you do. So tell the story in more than one way. As an example, right? This might be one way that a church staff might split up their ministry budget. They kind of show the different things that they do and percentage of total, how much time they spend in each area. And remember, it's not to track. It's not to keep track of anything. It's to just show the impact of everything. That's the point of a narrative budget. Tip number 4. This is all overwhelming and you have no idea what to do. And maybe like me, in 3rd grade, you were told you were no good at math, which is what I was told in 3rd grade by that teacher who I still hold a grudge about. I've tried to forgive her, but I'll let Jesus forgive her in ways I can't. Turns out I was actually very good at math, but I labored under the delusion I wasn't. But when I started doing this, especially at my last parish, I found the number of accountants that we had, and I was like, listen, you got to help me because I do not excel at Excel. So you can help me do it. And they helped me take the budget, and the staff gathered around, and even the council got involved. And we were able to split it up and create the narratives together. You don't have to do this alone. It doesn't have to be daunting. If you don't know how to do it, somebody in your congregation does. Find that person with killer math skills and then engage them in the process. Tip number 3, use charts. Once you figure out who that person is that knows how to do Excel, Excel generates charts for you. And you can even YouTube it. It'll show you how to do it. Charts and visual aids help you understand impact. They talk to different people of different learning modalities. And charts are fun. You can replicate them everywhere. You can put them on bulletin boards. You could send them out in email blasts, right? Charts tell stories that bare numbers don't often convey. So take the opportunity to show it in a chart. And I'll just show you I took the last one where we split up the ministry plan together, right? And the percentages, I made it into a pie chart. And this is what it is. And if you can see here, you can say they spend a whole lot of their budget on partner ministries, which is beautiful and amazing. About a quarter on faith formation, a quarter on worship, 15% maybe on care and outreach, and the rest on ministry support. It shows the truth in a different way, and it shows it in a deeper way than a line item budget can show. And tip number 2, Smiley, happy people holding hands tell a story. So use real photos of real ministry happening when you create your ministry or your narrative budget. Don't do what I did with this presentation, which is show nicely manicured hands, all of the same race, putting Post-it notes on it, right? I couldn't customize it in that way. Otherwise, it'd just be pictures of my kids. So, but you can. Tell real ministry stories. And whatever your congregation looks like, those are the pictures you use. Do not use stock photos. Don't try to insert folks that aren't there, because what tells the real story about mission are your people. So use them. Obviously get permission, but use them. And then finally, tip number 1 when creating a narrative budget, make sure that you have a line item budget on hand. Because that's the work, that's the stuff you did to get to the narrative budget, to tell the stories. It's one of the ways that I was able to satisfy everybody in the congregation. Those who were story learners, they loved the narrative budget, they took it. Those who really loved numbers or wanted to see it, they had the line item budget too. And they could see the beauty between them and how they fed into each other. But I gotta tell you, I got more investment, more generosity when I used the narrative budget than I ever did when I just used the line item budget, because people could see the impact of lives being changed. You can get your council involved, help them to see the beauty of the impact that they do, and you can get them to sell this to the rest of the congregation too, as a viable way to look at your ministry in action. I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to answer any questions that you might have. And yeah, we'll have all of these slides available for you. I'll send them off to Rebel right after I'm done. But happy to answer any questions that you have here. And also want you to know that I'm a resource available to help you create these if you need to. All right.
Thank you so much, Pastor Tim. Who's got some questions out there? You can put them in the chat, or you can just start speaking.
I'll go ahead. I'll speak for many of us. Many of us are multiple point parishes, which puts another, maybe adds to it, maybe simplifies it. Anything about that?
Yeah, thanks, Al. You know, for a multi-point parish, if you're known as a parish, right? I think we were talking last night, there was a Rice Prairie Parish or Rice or something like that. And there were a parish that were together with 3 or 4 churches. To me, if you're known as a parish, to me, the important thing there is to show 2 things at the same time. One, how your work impacts that parish community together. And then I would have a separate line item budget as well. And so for that, you do the line item budget for your parishes, but it's not that big of a step to go ahead and create a narrative budget that shows how your collective parish changes lives for Christ in the area that you are. So that's what I would do. I would create one narrative budget for your parish, and then have the separate line item budgets for each individual congregation as necessary. But talk about it like that, because I think one of the things, especially in parish context, is they have a hard time seeing themselves as being together, right? A narrative budget can bring them together in a way that simple line item budgets just can't do.
Wonderful. What else?
Tim, this is another Tim, and I'm curious your use of the word outpost, because I think we struggle a little bit with the amount of energy we place in-house and the amount of energy we offer in the community. And I'm curious how you define outpost and how that works for you.
Yeah, so when I use outposts, I really just mean kind of the base of operations for a lot of your ministry, right? There's always going to be a benefit, a detriment analysis that happens with any structure. But too many folks see a building as just kind of a place. And I'll give you an example. Like, I want you to imagine for me a structure at the end of a cul-de-sac, right? And then imagine that structure, and then I'm going to say, well, that's actually where I live. So then you imagine a house, right? Then I'm going to say, that's where I'm raising my babies. Now, how does that change the way you feel about that building? The last one's the truth. I mean, they're all facts, but the last one's the truth. And when you talk about your church building as a ministry outpost, I hope you're able to tell the truth about it, right? This is where we gather. This is where we hear the word. This is where we care for each other. We feed each other. We open it to the community as we are able. This might be the only safe place for the kids to play basketball, right? Tell the truth about your building and your structure. And if you can't tell the truth in a way that's actually beneficial, then it's time to consider, options there. But for a lot of us, we just consider our buildings to be this albatross. Sometimes it is. But what if we start talking about it as a ministry outpost, as a place of possibility? How does that change the way that we engage with it? That we see our money doesn't go to pay for light bills. It actually goes to pay for having lights so that folks can tell deep truths in the basement during an AA meeting, right? I mean, that's a big difference.
I really loved your visual of breathing in and breathing out. You're doing work both inside the outpost and outside in the community, and that feeling of the Holy Spirit goes with you when you're both in and out. I thought that was really nice. What else?
Pastor Tim, I worked at a church that we did a narrative budget once. And I know that time is, stewardship of time is something that is necessary to keep in mind. And it was more work to do the narrative budget. But since we only did it the one time, I'm curious if you have any hints or tips for those who want to take it on, and to know if it does get easier the more you do it.
Right. So I'll borrow a line from Saint Katz of the Stevens. The first cut is the deepest. It always is. To wrap your mind around how to take a line item budget and fit it into those ministry areas, it takes a second. But here's the thing. You do that in 2023. In 2024, you have the ministry areas already, right? You have it kind of all figured out. You have some narratives around it. You've been paying attention, so you have some stories that go with those ministry areas. So then it just comes down to the math. And the math probably is about the same. You put in raises or changes in status or things like that. But once you have the model and the template, it gets a little bit easier to do it every time. And it stays ever fresh because the stories of impact always change. So the first time is going to be the most difficult, but know that after that it gets a little bit easier.
I have
Thank
a question.
You so much. Go ahead, Wanda.
So I don't want everyone to get bored who's already done this, but I'm just wondering if for those of us who have never done it, where do we start, and how often or how frequently do you review or assess your narrative?
Well, thanks, Wanda. I really appreciate that. I'm going to answer your first question first, then your second question second, like my third grade teacher taught me. So the first question, I would say start with the line item budget that you have, right? And in that line item budget, I hope you have something in there for next year that's going to be kind of interesting, new, or different. And you're going to want to say, whatever ministry category that might fall into, like youth and family engagement or worship ministry, right? We're going to do something different. You're going to highlight that because that's going to be like, this is what we're adding this year. This is why we're asking for a little bit more this year. And some of that other stuff will be around sustaining ministry excellence, right? The other stuff that you're doing, but use that line item budget, pull out what you want to do different for next year, and then start there with the ministry categories that you might put things into, whether it's engaging all of God's children, which would be like Sunday school or youth ministry, things like that, or reaching out in caring ministries. That would be like Stephen ministers or chaplaincy or hospital attendance, right? You do that sort of stuff, and you plug things into it there. And I only did it once a year because this is the thing that we would unveil at the annual meeting. It'd kind of be a celebratory thing. I passed it out in October or November when we were prepping up for the annual meeting, and then we'd get it out there in January and discuss it all together. But I'd have it far in advance so that folks could see it. And every year we would just reevaluate and plug in the numbers and see where we were. That's what I would do. Did that answer your question, Wanda? Yeah. It's not a whole lot of time. It's once a year, but you do have to think ahead. And pulling out quotes and stories, that's really important. I see Stephanie's got her hand raised.
One of the things that since I came just before Advent this last year to this new parish, one of the things that I had been kind of tracking in my last one, but started right at the beginning of the year, this year, in my calendar, I pencil everything in. And then as I did it, I would color code whether it was related to worship or whether it was related to faith formation or whether it was related to outreach in the community events and things like that. So then I got to the end of the month, if I'm feeling unbalanced, I can see where I've been putting all of my energy into meetings because that's filling up the whole time and the others are missing. Or if I'm feeling buoyant, it's because I noticed that I've been doing a whole lot more worship services, which is what fills me. But then I can find balance. And then at the end of the year, I can already track how much percentage-wise of time I put into each of those areas. So it's easier to divide out. So that's a place that you can start with, just mapping your own time at the end of each day. Just quickly color code what you've done time-wise, and then you've got it.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Really appreciate that. I'm glad you came in right at a not busy time there at the beginning of Advent, right? Nothing else to pay attention to. That's a great way to do a personal audit.
And it also helps tell others.
Absolutely. Yep.
Any final questions for Pastor Tim? All right. Well, you certainly can reach out to him, like he said, and you are welcome to stay, Pastor Tim, of course. And also, you can take off if you want, but we will post the video of this on the YouTube page when it's all said and done. And we'll make sure that these slides are available to all of you as well. Thank you, Pastor Tim, for sharing that.
Thank you, and God bless Northwest Minnesota, and go Packers.
Go Pack. Yeah, thanks, Tim. And look forward to seeing you here. Are you going to be in Chicago during COB at all, or?
I will. Look forward to it, Bill.
Look forward to seeing you there. Great. I think Pastor Janelle is up next with some ministry conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback after Pastor Tim and our meeting with some of your council presidents last night. The question comes right away, like, we aren't doing much. What would we report on? What kind of ministries can help make this a budget? So for those of you who've been on the road trip, you've seen my list of activities that have been going on. Christina's going to put it up on the screen again. But just to remember that your churches are doing a lot. Sometimes these things aren't in the budget, but they make great stories too. So don't forget what your welcome groups are doing, how you're supporting ministries that are outside the congregation, and of course, those things that are going on inside the congregation. But with this list, is maybe just a prompt to say, how could these get into your narrative budgets? How can they tell the story of the work that not only you're doing in your congregations, but in your conferences and also in our synod? So there's so many great ministries going on, and along the road trip, we've heard of so many other great stories of things that are going on. I just want this list to prompt your imagination of things that you can add to your narrative of budget, because what you're doing is changing lives, and it is loving God and loving neighbor. So there are so many things we could talk about this, but Pastor Rebel, is there one ministry here that you would like to encourage them to think about in their narrative budget?
Oh, it's so not fair to ask me that question because there's a lot of them here. But Pastor or Bishop Bill and myself were at the Women of the ELCA convention this last weekend. And one of the things that we saw, and I wonder if maybe it's part of your ministry as well, is they had gathered a couple of 100 kits for folks to be sent out for Lutheran World Relief. And after hearing Pastor Brigitte talk about People's Church, they said, oh, well, why don't we send some of those to People's Church as well? And so that was a gift, right? That was taking this work that we do as the larger church and making sure that it's also serving our local churches. And so I think that there's a couple in there. And yeah, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think too, one other thing, just to know the work that we're doing together with the shortage of pastors, I think there's a little bit of anxiety in the air. Our SAMs have been an incredible blessing, but one recruitment tool that we use in recruiting new pastors to our synod is the seminary debt reduction scholarships. Together, your churches gave enough money that we could bless pastors in our synod up to the tune of $50,000 this last year. That is an amazing amount of money. It's life-changing, and pastors are very interested in serving here when they know that the synod looks that way. So if your church hasn't given an offering to that, many of you have, that's another way we can be church together. So I think we're going to use the rest of this time. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us about these narrative budgets and how to insert these stories. We're working on it too in our synod as we have our first fundraiser coming up soon on Give to the Max here in November. But I think we're going to end our time here just talking about all the events that are coming up so that they're on your radar and you know how to invite your people. So Christine, I'll give it back to you.
I just threw a Word document in the chat because I just received it seconds ago from The Way, and who does not want to be invited to a Indian taco sale? So I hope you can open it. If you can't, email me.
Yum. Pastor Rebel, this Saturday, what are you doing?
Ooh, this Saturday is our Vitality Day, and the registration has not yet closed. I believe it goes until 7 p.m. tonight. Yes. Okay, good. And so if you want to join and have conversation of what God is up to in your neck of the woods and to really step into the gaps, Pastor Melissa Pickering, myself, and Pastor Sue Kesterman will be leading the day, and it will be it'll be a great day. So please join us if that's something of interest to you. And because I have to go on to another meeting that I have to start with the devotions, I am going to plug this as well. So Murder on the Red River. If you plan on number 1 being at Fall Theological, okay, hold that. If you plan on being at Fall Theological and you plan on joining the book read, number 2, I want you to pick a number between 1 and 100 and throw it in the chat. And if you pick the same number, closest number to me, I will deliver this book to you at Fall Theological. So I'm not going to look. I have it written down. But this is going to be a fun book read. I think it has so many deep aspects of our own culture right here in northwestern Minnesota, and the amount of racism that happens just in our daily lives that we don't even see anymore. The implicit bias that just runs through our lives. So I look forward to being in conversation. The anti-racism team, many of whom are on here, will be leading it. And yeah, join us.
Pastor Rebel, before you go away, can you speak to the Stewardship Day?
You bet. Stewardship Day, September 16th, I believe. And Pastor, am I wrong? October 28th.
October. Yeah.
October 28th. September 16th would be this Saturday. October 28th, Pastor Larry Stringy and myself will be leading a Stewardship Generosity Day in Detroit Lakes. And we will have some good takeaways of things for you to actually practical things for you to try and to live out in your congregation. And also, we will go through everything that there is to talk about stewardship. Larry is an amazing, gifted leader, and Pastor Tim told me to ask him, so I did. So Pastor Tim's wonderful too. And so join us if many of you have contacted me at different times to talk about stewardship and generosity. And this is the time that we'll just dig into all of it. So set aside that day. You can send anyone from your congregation. It doesn't necessarily need to be you.
For both of those two events, the Congregational Vitality Day and the Stewardship Day, if you are a SAM, you get a discount. And if you bring and sign up 4 or more people, and you sign them up at the same time, you get a reduced price. Instead of $40 a person, it's $25 a person. So sign up your groups. The number was 61. Rebel, can you pick your winner? It looks like Pastor Wade, right? Because your number was 62, he picked 61.
Perfect. I picked 61 as well. It might just be sloppy. So that's
Okay.
incredible. I will deliver that to you, Pastor Wade. Well done.
Must be.
I suspect that Pastor Wade put that number out there because it's a great year to be born, and that's the year I was born too. So I'm pretty sure that's the secret behind that.
Got a little something on your nose, Pastor Wade, if that's what it is. So another book
I can't get my
read.
camera. I can't get my camera to work, but I did not know that. I only knew that Bill was younger than I am, and that's not why. But happy birthday on the year 61.
All right, Pastor Rebel, I think, does anyone have any Pastor Rebel specific questions before she has to go? All right. You know how to get a hold of her.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
All right. After Fall Theological, I'm going to start a book read on growing young. And I'm doing this over Zoom. One on Tuesdays, one at 1 o'clock and one at 7 o'clock. And we got a lot of really great feedback from Kara Powell, who our speaker from Synod Assembly. And I really see this as a great opportunity for some of your council people, or some, not maybe in this, like you guys are obviously invited too, but this is for every and anyone in your congregations. And so they'll be 45 to 50 minutes long, and you need your book and come, and we will discuss one chapter at a time each week, skipping Halloween. And we will go through this and dream about every church can grow young. It's not just about getting young people in the door, but it's about that congregational vitality and the stuff that Kara Powell spoke about. Pastor Janelle, we have some things coming up, some road trips.
Yes,
I can throw up the dates.
Yeah, if you haven't joined us, we have 3 more, one in McIntosh, one in Wolverton, and one in Nevis. We'll end on my side of the Synod. So again, you can invite your people to any of them. They've been delightful conversations, and we'd love to see you out on the road.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. I know you guys are on our Synod's website all the time because it's such an exciting website. So on our website, we have this bar here and on the events. And I spent some time this last month putting the events that are coming up on here with all the links that you need. We have this anti-racism training that's happening right after Fall Theological. So you can just go right over to Trinity and DL after and lunch will be there for you. So I encourage you to check that out. All the road trip days, growing young, all of this stuff is on here with all the information that you need. So check out the events page. I'm going to try really hard to keep it up to date, but we have so much going on. So check all of that out. And one other thing before I pass it to Bishop Bill, is I want to share with you an Advent text study opportunity. Pastors Jake Anderson and Melissa Pickering are offering an Advent and Christmas text study. It's October 16th at NDSU at Crossroads Ministry. And it will be a day for digging into all the Advent texts and the Christmas Eve texts. So this flyer will be at Fall Theological, and information will be in next week's Northern Lights, because there's just way too much in this week. So I'm going to stop and then pass it back to Bishop Bill.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I think Janelle mentioned it, but I just lift it up to you again. All of the things we do, much of what you're seeing that's maybe you haven't seen before coming from your synod, it's funded by the money that we raise outside of our synod mission plan through for our strategic initiatives. So that's mostly the work we do for Minnesota Gives Day, which is November 17th this year, and Giving Hearts Day in February of next year. And we just met with the Offit Family Foundation leaders today, Ron Offit and Tom Espel, who have been very generous with matching gifts over the years, and we made another ask for a matching gift for this year. So they love it when we meet that match early in the day. So would love to have your participation in that at any level. So just thank you in advance for that. You know, if you think about mission support, which is, as you know, it's what your congregation decides what proportion of general offering will be shared through the synod with the wider church. You know, that is still the major way that we fund all our work as a synod, all of the things that we're constitutionally mandated to do and that you are accustomed to seeing in terms of services from synod. And the way to think about that is that those are the things that we have agreed are necessary for us to address over the long haul. All of those big rock items that we have to invest in as a church, you know, developing leaders in candidacy, accompanying congregations in transition, and you know, ecumenical relations, the big things that we do, both as synod and then as a whole church, where 47% of your mission support goes. So, but mission support is not a good way to respond to emerging trends and for innovations and strategic work. And so for that, we really need to do this additional work. So thanks for your participation. Thanks for being here today. Thank you for your leadership in your local congregation. And I just want to conclude with this prayer, which has been, I've been walking with this prayer of Martin Luther quite a bit lately. So I share it with you, and it's out of the Armed Forces Prayer Book in the section on prayers of the saints, or prayers of the faithful. Let us pray. Behold, Lord, an empty vessel that needs to be filled. My Lord, fill it. I am weak in faith. Strengthen me. I am cold in love. Warm me and make me fervent, that my love may go out to my neighbor. I do not have a strong and firm faith. At times I doubt and am unable to trust you altogether. O Lord, help me. Strengthen my faith and trust in you. In you I have sealed the treasure of all I have. I am poor, you are rich, and came to be merciful to the poor. I am a sinner, you are upright. With me there is an abundance of sin, in you is the fullness of righteousness. Therefore, I will remain in you, of whom I can receive, but to whom I may not give. Amen.
Amen.
A blessed day to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and hope to see a lot of you next week.
Thank you.